All right, let's talk volleyball. When you're watching a game, it can look like, well, organized chaos, right? But underneath it all, there's this secret system, this brilliant strategic dance. And that's what we're diving into today, rotation. It's literally the hidden engine that powers every single point.
I mean, you've definitely seen this, right? The whistle blows, a point ends, and suddenly the entire team shuffles one spot over. It can look totally random, but trust me, it's one of the most fundamental systems in the game. So, what's the deal? Why are they constantly moving places? Well, we're going to break it all down.
So first things first, what even is rotation? At its very core, it's all about one thing: fairness. You can think of it as the game's built-in balancing mechanism, making sure no single player can just take over from one spot on the court.
Okay, so for the official definition, rotation is that clockwise shift the team makes, but, and this is the most important part, it only happens at one very specific moment, right after you win the serve back from your opponent. That moment has a name. It's called a side out. Remember that.
So, why even have this rule? Well, like I said, it's all about balance. It guarantees every single player has to cycle through the front row and the back row. That means everyone gets a chance to serve. It forces players to become well-rounded. You can't just be a great hitter who can't pass. Nope. This rule makes you develop all your skills, and that's what makes the entire game so much more dynamic.
To really get a grip on rotation, you've got to understand the court itself. It's not just an open space. It's a grid of 6 distinct zones, and the way players move through them, it's perfectly predictable. See, the court is split into a front row, that's positions 2, 3, and 4, and a back row, which is 5, 6, and 1. Just think of the front row as your offense. You know, your primary attackers and blockers, right up at the net. And the back row? That's your defensive anchor. Oh, and that very special spot, position 1, that's where every point begins. The server's.
Now, the movement itself is super simple and totally non-negotiable. It is always clockwise. Every player just shifts one spot over, kind of like the hands on a clock. The whole point of this cycle is for the player in position 2 to eventually rotate into that critical serving spot at position 1. This predictable clockwork motion is really the foundation of the game's flow.
All right, so we know what rotation is and which way the players move. Now for the really important part, the specific rules that govern when and how all this happens. If you can get this down, you've pretty much unlocked the whole system.
Okay, this right here, this clears up the number one point of confusion. You only, and I mean only, rotate after winning the serve back from your opponent. So let's say your team is already serving and you score 3 points in a row. Guess what? Nobody moves. You stay put. Just think of the rotation as your reward for breaking the other team's serve.
Now here's where it gets a little tricky. Before the serve, players can't just stand wherever they want. For a split second, they have to be in a legal formation. The first part of this is about vertical alignment. At the exact moment of the serve, every front row player has to be closer to the net than their direct counterpart in the back row.
And that same idea applies horizontally. The player on the left side of the court has to be to the left of the player in the middle. It creates these 3 simple columns of players.
Same goes for the right side, of course. This basically creates an invisible grid you have to follow. But, and here's the key, this super rigid formation only matters for a split second. The very instant the server contacts the ball, that formation just dissolves, and players are free to sprint to their optimal positions to run the play. It's this momentary freeze right before the action explodes.
So we've covered the rules, but you have to understand, at the higher levels of volleyball, rotation isn't just a rule you follow, it's a weapon. It's the chessboard on which the entire game's strategy is played out. Let me give you a perfect example of the strategic impact. Let's take the setter. They're basically the team's quarterback. When that setter is in the front row, the team has 2 attackers available at the net. But when rotation moves that same setter to the back row, bam! Suddenly you have 3 attackers up front. That is a huge offensive advantage. And believe me, teams build their entire game plan around maximizing those 3 attacker rotations.
This kind of strategic thinking leads to these specialized systems. You know, beginners often use what's called a 4-2, which has 2 setters. More advanced teams might use a 6-2, which is designed to always keep 3 attackers at the net. But at the pro level, you're almost always going to see the 5-1 system. One elite setter running the entire offense through all 6 rotations.
And honestly, it gets even deeper. Coaches will meticulously plan their starting lineup and their rotation order just to create advantages. They'll try to line up their best blocker against the other team's star hitter. Or maybe they'll position a weaker passer in a rotation where they're less likely to get served at. It is a high-stakes game of chess before the first point is even played. So in the end, rotation is so much more than just players moving in a circle. It really is the backbone of the sport. It controls everything from basic fairness to complex strategy and the whole rhythm of the game. So the next time you watch a match and you see that familiar clockwise shift, you'll know. You're not just seeing movement, you're seeing the hidden language of volleyball in action.